Hello everyone, and welcome to our webinar this afternoon. This afternoon we have with us John Magee of Overseas Results. I'm absolutely delighted to have him with us. What we're going to do is we're going to have an in-conversation with John, and at the end, afterwards, you'll all be sent a presentation and interesting URLs, etc. John I met about 4 years ago, and he has a huge amount of knowledge in the area of Brexit and businesses, and he has had to gain knowledge quite rapidly and live through the challenges, business challenges of COVID. Now he works globally, so I think his insights are going to be very interesting. As usual, please type your questions into the Q&A and I'll collate them, and at the end we will give them to John and get his opinion on things. So type loads of them in, because this is a kind of a live opportunity to gain as much insight as you possibly can. So with that, I'd like to hand over to John, and thank you.
Thank you very much, Emer. It's wonderful to join you all this afternoon in what are very interesting times. I've been running my own business for 25 years, so I do know how hard it is, and I have complete respect for anyone that does so. So today's webinar is designed to help you with the practical actions that you can take as you plan post-COVID-19 and Brexit. It's in no way a criticism or a critique of your existing business or your existing strategies. That's not the intention. I normally consult on a one-to-one basis by getting to understand you and your business in detail. I clearly can't do that through a webinar, but what I can do is I can highlight general advice that I would ask you to consider as you plan for the future. There will be some elements that apply to you and some elements that don't, but each of you today will take something useful from this webinar. If you feel that you would benefit from one-to-one consulting advice specific to your business, then please follow up directly with your normal contact point in the Design and Craft Council. Business planning is usually a case of identifying past trends and extrapolating them, using them to determine the future. The difficulty is that we've never come out of a COVID-19 situation before or seen the other side of Brexit. But if we take COVID firstly, now I don't intend to go over material that has already been very well covered in previous webinars about the government assistance available and the support from other organisations. Those people in those webinars did a fantastic job, and if you haven't seen them, please make a point of doing so. Now, I wish that I could tell you that the future months will see matters improve, but unfortunately, as part of our planning, we have to prepare for a second wave of COVID that's likely later this year. To plan effectively, you need to therefore take a fundamental review of your business. It's probably the likes of which you've never had to do before. Now, a previous webinar presentation by Brendan Cullen, he made a very good point when he said that your goal at the moment is to survive. And we need to ensure that we do not spend 1 cent more than we need to. You need to ensure that you are still in existence when business does return. But how do you do that exactly? How can your planning and your actions maximize your chances of survival? The answer is you're going to use something grandly in financial circles called zero-based budgeting. Now, as the name suggests, you start from zero. You start with a white blank sheet of paper. You have no expenses in your business, and what you need to do is you need to one by one go through all the proposed expenses. And I mean every single expense. You start from zero and you question whether each item of expense is absolutely necessary. You need to be brutal and you need to be decisive. So step one, look at the expense item and ask the question, do I absolutely need it? And if the answer is yes, then you move on to step two. Step two is that you investigate, are there cheaper options? If you complete that step and there are no cheaper options, then you move on to step three. And step three is that you then make contact with your current provider and you ask for a payment holiday or a reduction. Now remember, companies will not do so willingly, but you must go through the 3 steps outlined for every single expense in your business. Now, if it's a large company that you're contacting, the people that you need to speak to are the retentions department. There's no point speaking to anyone else. The retentions department are the people who have the authority, and they also have the ability to grant reductions or make offers to you which will keep you as a customer. And they're motivated to do so because they have specific performance targets tied to the customers that they retain. So it's in their interest to do so. If there is not a retentions department, then you should ask for details of how you can cancel and what penalties, if any, there might be. Explain that you would like to keep using the service on offer and continue the relationship with the organization, but you need to reduce costs. You can also ask what facility there might be to enable you to suspend the service for a while and then take it up again at a later date. Now, the person at the other end of the call, they might need time to go away and come back to you about a proposed offer. That's fine. Let them do that. It doesn't have to be agreed in one phone call. And similarly, they might come back to you with an offer and you might also want time to consider what they're proposing, especially if perhaps they're reducing the price, but they're tying you into a longer fixed term contract. It's a vitally important planning exercise that can have a significant impact upon your survival, but it can only be completed by you. Now, it might seem that matters at the moment are outside of your control and we're sort of blown in any direction, but this is an action that you have control over. Start with your biggest expenses, because any savings that you can make there will have the largest effect. So the sooner that you can reduce those costs, the better. Now, unfortunately, the categories that normally fall within largest expenses, one is payroll, and the second would be rent, if you're paying that, a holiday or some form of reduction. Once you deal with the bigger expenses, keep going through the rest of the list. Mobile provision, broadband, website hosting, your payment processing provider, all of them. Don't fall into the trap of assuming that they cannot or simply will not do anything. Contact everyone. I, for example, recently contacted my car insurance provider because I was simply not doing the mileage due to COVID-19 that I would normally be completing. And as a result of the discussion with the insurance provider, I received a reduction, a payment back from my car insurance. So don't assume that the answer is going to be no. You'll be very surprised at the reaction that you receive. But keep going right down your list and do not incur any expense until you've completed all 3 steps for each expense item. But again, I would repeat, do be mindful of fixed term agreements or penalty clauses if you exit. You should still, though, ask for the details of these, because again, simply by asking the company for those details tells them that you're serious about the possibility of no longer having their service. And as we all know as companies, it's difficult once you lose a customer to attract that customer back. And these companies do not want to do that if at all possible. They want to retain you as a customer. It's probably the case for most of you watching this webinar as well, that the line between business and personal expense is somewhat blurred. So the issue of survival also means taking the same approach to your personal circumstances, because the less money your business needs to generate in order to sustain you, then the longer you can keep going. Now, after you've completed your zero-based accounting, you can then at that point turn to sales. We've now ensured, as a result of the zero-based accounting, that our business is lean and we're able to sustain ourselves on meager rations. Now, this automatically relieves a lot of the pressure on sales. But in terms of sales planning, I would make the following points. Firstly, don't act as if COVID-19 never happened. Communicate with your existing customers about how you've put in place measures regarding cleaning, staff protection, etc. Now, this is not simply contacting your customers to tell them that you're open for business, but it's contacting them with information that shows that you're safely open for business. You could include a video or written information on your website about steps that you've taken in light of COVID-19 to protect your staff and your customers. Now, there's an excellent example of a video that's been put together by a motor car dealership very close to where I'm based here in Oma, called Greg Mitchell Motors. And as Emer indicated, we'll provide all the URLs for this information in a handout later, and you can watch the videos as examples. But in Greg Mitchell Motors, they realized that people would be wary of starting to rebook their cars back in for services. So rather than basically just continue with their normal promotions, they developed a video in which they very carefully explain how things have changed in the showroom, how they've introduced a one-way system, and it would be social distancing. They explain how covers will be placed in the insides of the vehicles, how a cover will be even put over the gear stick, and that all surfaces will be sanitized before the car is returned, including the steering wheel and the inside door handles and even the outside door handles. So as they finish work with the car, it's returned to you without any issues in terms of transfer of COVID-19. And that's the reassurance that customers are looking for. But communicating to customers the steps that you've taken, it doesn't need to cost you anything. It's a simple video that you could put together yourself. Now, this also applies to those of you who are sending products to customers. Show them how your production process has followed or is following best practice, and how your items and your products are sanitized before they're packaged, and that you've followed the best practice guidelines and that it's safe to do business with you. Don't assume that they'll know that. Now, clearly, as a direct consequence of COVID-19, people were forced to shop online much more than they'd done so before. And one of the great unknowns that we're faced with is to what degree people will revert back to bricks and mortar in the future. From a planning point of view, I would suggest that it would be prudent to assume that the level of bricks and mortar shopping will never return to previous levels. I believe that the trend towards online is relentless. And at this point, I suppose when I hear people talking about the move to online, what I would like to do is I would like to talk about what online actually means. It's vital that we have a clearer understanding of what we mean in order that we can plan effectively. Now, when the internet first came into being, I remember that being online simply meant that you had a static page about your company, one page. Then online progressed and it began to mean being able to engage with people and transact and have e-commerce. But what does being online mean now? From a planning point of view, I would suggest it no longer means just taking what you do normally in your business, but selling it via a website. Now, for example, people are buying and shopping online using mobile devices rather than desktops. And in the past, it was enough to simply have your website and have it in such a way that it could be viewed on a mobile or tablet. But if we're planning for the future, I don't believe that's enough anymore. We're moving towards an expectation of a dedicated app. Now, we all know the difference between trying to maneuver through a website on our mobile compared to using a dedicated app, and there is no comparison. I would also suggest to you that consumers are much less tolerant of poor interfaces. The expectation now is that the app has to be intuitive. So planning for an online future now means that you are open 24 hours a day and 365 days a year. But that doesn't just mean that you're open for business to sell. It means that you must be also open for business to provide customer care and support. Now, companies in the past were able to offer a live chat service, a little box would appear. But again, they were normally restricted and reflected the hours that the bricks and mortar business would normally be open. But that kind of feature isn't enough anymore. We're now moving, again, if we're talking about planning and being ready for the move towards online, we're now talking about artificial intelligence, customer support chatbots. Now, it sounds like something straight out of a science fiction movie, but it's happening here and now. And I'll give you an example of one. Hipmunk is a popular platform that lets users search for travel deals. And it created its Hello chatbot. Now, the Hello chatbot helps visitors to search and reserve their travel activity of choice. The chatbot is artificially intelligent. It determines the user's location, and then it aggregates and promotes discounts and deals on travel packages. And put it simply, it saves the customer for having to go to a variety of other sources. It does it for the customer, and it presents the customer with practically one ideal choice, one solution for them. And the chatbot searches hundreds of travel options and returns with the best deal in a matter of seconds. And the chatbot uses very friendly language because what they're trying to do with it is it's trying to imitate a human travel agent. The success of that chatbot means that Hipmunk has been able to convert users to book flights and deals with the high level of engagement. The customer's travel search process becomes brief and conversational. They see great deals, and it's all from a chat window. The AI chatbot can even answer vague questions, and it can deliver a valuable experience to customers. Again, 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. Now, I had a similar experience through COVID. I'm sure probably most of you have with my bank. And in the case of my bank, again, it wasn't a human that I was dealing with in live chat. It was an AI chatbot. And it's extraordinary how things have developed where you're able to answer broad queries and obtain the answer that you're looking for without actual human intervention. In terms of planning for the future as well, if we are talking about online, then that's going to feed directly into the product development process also. Because being truly online means that we have to be cognizant of the weight of our products, the dimensions, the materials that they're made from, because all of those directly dictate the shipping and delivery. And a few millimeters here and a few grams there can make a huge difference in terms of costs online. It's reached a point where we need to develop products which are designed for delivery. And even the term delivery has taken on a more specific meaning as a consequence of COVID-19. And let me give you an example by way of illustration. Flower bouquets and deliveries of flowers for years online simply meant that a transaction had moved digitally instead of in person or over the phone. But the actual mechanics remained the same. The person ordered a bouquet and a person had to be at home in order to receive delivery of the flowers. But what they did within the flowers industry is they reverse engineered the process. They clearly had a starting point, which was, how do we get the flowers through the letterbox? Now, they faced a lot of challenges to do so, as one can imagine, but they developed a fantastic solution to that. Now, again, we'll provide a URL for you to show a video of a company called Bloom & Wild that have developed the letterbox deliveries for flowers. And the video will show you the company ad, the promotional vehicle for the service. But might I also suggest that you also Google for something like letterbox flowers opening. And we've all seen these types of videos where someone is testing the product. So they've received one of the letterbox packages and they have the opening and they take you through it, because it'll give you a much clearer idea of all the elements that are contained within this new product development that makes it so successful. Bloom & Wild is just one example. By the way, there are many flower companies doing the same service. And once they've gone down that path and been successful in terms of bouquets and flowers, they actually now also do mini Christmas trees through your letterbox with lights and decorations. Other sectors are doing the same thing. They've looked at what happened as a result of COVID-19 and the idea of social distancing, minimizing contact, and there seems to be a drive now about letterbox deliveries so that the person doesn't have to be at home and they don't have to make contact with a delivery driver. Again, I'll provide you some URLs of these other sectors in the handout and you can look at these at your leisure. Examples would be letterbox hampers, food hampers that arrive and can fit through the letterbox. A company called Cake Nest, which obviously produce lovely cakes and buns and things of that nature. But one of my particular favorites is Letterbox Wine. And again, you know, if bouquets of flowers seem to be incomprehensible for letterbox delivery, then you're wondering how on earth letterbox wine. Well, what this company did was they took the standard 70 cl wine bottle and they flattened it. And it's still 70 cl, but it's made from, instead of glass, it's made from PT. And what they've done is they've revolutionized the wine industry, because it also means that from a transport point of view, the bottles are much more compact and you can fit much more bottles in a box, etc. So from an environmental point of view, it's saving the environment as well. Another example of letterbox deliveries would be Ruby and Freddie's letterbox gift sets. And another example is what's called the runner's kit, which is for those of you that are into running and exercising. And that's another great example where they've included within the runner's kit items which draw upon some of the big trends out there: running and exercise, and nutrition and health. But all of the examples have one thing in common, and that is that they tick the box for letterbox delivery. There's no sorry we missed you, or the item being left at your doorstep in the rain. And that's more and more what people are looking for. It's an example of a creative approach to planning which is designed for the online world. This leads me to discuss another important element of planning in terms of a post-COVID online world. And this one, I suppose, will be very challenging for a lot of you to hear, but in the past, it was generally accepted that to be online, you developed your own website. I'm not going to tell you how much time and money you have devoted to developing your own website. The design itself, the cost of hosting, the add-ons required in order to get the functionality, the customer desires, not to mention, and that's when it goes smoothly, not to mention glitches and interruptions. And on top of all that, you need to actually then have, once you've developed it, you need to have your site visible and attract traffic. And then you start to become familiar with words like search engine optimization, and this becomes part of your everyday vocabulary. And your time commitment to the website just keeps increasing and increasing. And when some traffic does come to your site, you then have to deal with issues such as sales funnels and conversion rates and tracking to contend with. And I'm guessing that not many of you, before you started your own business, dreamt that you would be in perpetual servitude to your website. But unfortunately, the reality is that the development of the website means that you're spending less and less time doing the thing that you love and that you're good at. And instead, you're wrestling with a multitude of increasingly complex techie issues. Now, as part of a planning exercise, I would ask you to stop, and if you're planning for the future, to ask yourself a very hard question. And that is that the best strategy for you going forward? Is there an alternative option in which all the site design, the hosting, the coding, the uptime, downtime, payment processing is handled by someone else, and it allows you to focus upon what you do best and what you enjoy, the creative process? There are established platforms out there, and they spend fortunes on the tech side, as well as marketing and promotion and search engine optimization, vast amounts of money. And they attract huge traffic, and they provide visitors with apps and name recognition and security and confidence. And all of those things are so vital when we're talking about converting a visitor to an actual customer. And I wonder, is that an option for you? Could you be establishing a presence on several such platforms? Now, if I would draw the following bricks and mortar analogy, I would say it's almost a case of, would you rather have your own shop, but in a quiet part of the town with low footfall? Or would you rather have a concession operation within a number of well-known global retailers all over the world with high footfall, state-of-the-art infrastructure, great security, massive marketing budgets, promotional budgets, and they never close? They have the support service for 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. The strategy of using large platforms would also open your business to genuinely customers globally, because these leading platforms promote themselves at key times for festivals and celebrations and events all over the world, events and celebrations that probably we've never heard of. They also use the latest tracking cookies and algorithms to direct messages to customers based upon their purchase history and previous searches. And I wonder, could your business be offering your product or service to millions of people around the world 365 days a year, and allowing you to focus on the thing that you love and do best, which probably isn't developing a website? Now, to carry on the theme of these global platforms, not everyone celebrates Christmas. There are many religions in the world, and it's sometimes easy for us to forget that. The Chinese don't celebrate New Year as we know it. They celebrate what they call the Spring Festival, and it takes place depending on the lunar cycle, between the 21st of January and the 20th of February, over the course of that month each year. Now, before you say, look, I can't see myself shipping to China my products or services, again, if you take it from a different perspective, and I ask the question, how many Chinese do you think there are living outside of China, in Ireland, the UK, Europe, North America, countries that you would be delivering to? And I have some figures that might surprise you. Ireland, 60,000, UK, 500,000, USA, 5 million, Canada, 2 million, Australia, just over 1 million, France, 700,000, Italy, 350,000, Germany, 225,000. You get the idea. And in terms of 2021, as far as the Chinese calendar is concerned, this is the year of the rat. And you wonder at the opportunities open to businesses that are looking globally and understand, well, if I develop something that aligned to that theme, and those sorts of target customers living outside China, that's a big market that you could tap into. 2021, the year of the rat, probably doesn't excite a lot of people, but 2020, sorry, this year is the year of the rat. 2021 is the year of the cow. 2022 is the year of the tiger, and 2023 is the year of the rabbit. So perhaps some of those might be more appealing to you. But COVID-19 has accelerated the speed at which people are moving to online convenience, non-contact shopping. And it's important, I think, at this point to take some time in your planning process to think about what that online future looks like and exactly where and how you best fit within it. If I could turn now to the issue of Brexit and Brexit planning. The first thing I'd like to say is that if the European Union and the UK do not create a trade agreement before the end of this year, then on the 1st of January 2021, World Trade Organization rules will take effect. WTO. Now, I and you have heard terms thrown around like no deal and cliff edge. And these terms are very deliberately so, very emotive, but they're not in any way helpful to you as a business. Now, let me put it another way. The worst case scenario is that you might be trading or getting supplies from the UK in the same manner as 90% of global trade is already successfully conducted under WTO rules. Now, because something is just rephrased differently, it all of a sudden doesn't sound so worrying or untested as cliff edge deliberately does. So what are the practical steps that you can take to plan if there is no trade agreement and we're trading under WTO terms? I'm not talking too much detail because I think probably most people at this stage know about the EORI number, EORI number, and Economic Operator Registration and Identification. Go onto the Revenue Commissioner's website and apply for that. You need to have that in order to trade, not just outside of the EU, but within the EU as well. But if we look at the issue of supplies, you're bringing in supplies to your company, probably those watching fall within two broad groups. There is the first group where they have some suppliers from the UK, and a second group where they don't have any suppliers from the UK. And I say to the second group who don't have suppliers from the UK, don't turn off, don't think this doesn't apply to you, because the reality is that both groups need to check their supply lines. Because even if you have suppliers outside of the UK and none within the UK, there is the possibility that your supply lines, they're being brought to you via the UK land bridge, and therefore that might result in some delays. And the possibility of those delays will need to be planned for, and that might require you to build slightly higher stock levels than you normally would in advance of January the 1st, 2021. And that therefore increases your working capital requirement, and that will have an impact upon your cash flow. Now, for those of you who are making purchases from the UK and have existing suppliers, you need to check the possible impact upon your supplies from the UK. And yes, Northern Ireland is part of the UK as far as tariffs are concerned. Intertrade Ireland has created a wonderfully simple tariff checker. And again, we'll include the URL for the Intertrade Ireland tariff checker as part of a handout after the webinar. What I would say as well, let me just provide some caution. When you are checking the tariff that would apply to your products, be very careful about making sure that you're checking the correct code. I dealt with a client recently and I was asking questions about their supplies from the UK, and they said that they were bringing in plastics. And when I delved a little deeper, I then discovered that in actual fact, they were talking about cellophane. And cellophane is derived from cellulose, which means it falls within the tariff of paper and cardboard, not plastics. And the difference that makes is that because it's defined under the tariff for the paper and the cardboard packaging, it has a 0% tariff under WTO. But if the person had looked up plastics under packaging, they would have seen a 6.5% tariff. And therefore, they might have been afraid that they were going to have higher costs than would not have been the case. So when you look up the correct tariff code on the Intertrade Ireland tariff checker, there are a number of possible scenarios. One scenario is that, as with the case of that client, they look up the cellulose and they see that the particular supply item has 0% tariff. Great, wonderful. Don't need to do anything, you're thinking to yourself. The second option is that you look up the tariff code and there is a percentage that has to be added to that supply line. And then you've got two choices. You look at based upon the percentage of the tariff that's going to be applied, and you're making a decision whether that is something that you can absorb into your process and add on to the customer or pass it on. And if you can do so, fine. Another option is that you look at the percentage and perhaps it's such that you believe it can't be simply absorbed the full amount by yourself, in which case you then need to have a discussion with the supplier. And if you cannot find an accommodation or an agreement with that supplier that works for you economically, well, then you really need to begin the search for an alternative supplier, preferably within the EU, knowing then that there will be no tariff applied. If we take the same principle, but instead of supplies to sales that are going to the UK, again, you consult with the tariff checker in terms of the products that you're selling into the UK. If your product attracts a 0% tariff, well, again, fantastic news, but in this case, tell your customers that. Pass on the good news. Don't have them thinking that perhaps, again, the fear is that as a result of January the 1st, 2021 and WTO rules that you're going to be increasing prices because of tariffs. If you have done the research, that's not the case. Communicate that to your customers. It's fantastic news. Share it. If you do look and there are tariffs attached to your particular item selling into the UK, again, you have two options. One option is that you're looking at the percentage and you decide, can I absorb that into my costs? And if you can, again, tell your customers that that's what you're proposing to do. If you look at the percentage and you are not able or feel that you can't absorb that cost completely by yourself, then it's a discussion that you need to have with your customers in the UK, alerting them to that fact and seeing if there is a compromise that can be reached. Now, even under that worst case scenario, what I would say to you is that if it's a tariff applied to your product at such a rate that you feel it can't be absorbed by your company, then that also means that UK companies selling the same competitive products into the European Union and Ireland are faced with the same tariffs. So again, there's an opportunity there for you to perhaps make contact again with companies who didn't buy from you initially, who were sourcing perhaps from the UK, and make fresh inquiries as to whether they might be interested in perhaps changing their supply lines after January the 1st, 2021. What I will say to you is that Brexit is unlikely to cause you to become uncompetitive or for UK suppliers to become too expensive for you. There are certain industries that will be badly affected under WTO rules: chemicals, plastics, financial services. These are the sectors that you'll hear and read about in the news all the time, where the negotiating teams are at loggerheads, because if they can't reach agreement, the tariffs that they're talking about imposing are prohibitive and very damaging. And most of you, I would imagine, probably 99.9% of you will not be affected by that. I'd like to welcome the opportunity of speaking with you and how COVID-19 and Brexit planning can be undertaken in respect of your specific business. This is a general discussion here today on the webinar. And if you think that that would be of interest or helpful to you, please contact Emer. Thank you for your time listening today. I trust that the webinar has shown you that COVID-19 and Brexit planning will provide you with the best opportunity to seize future opportunities. I think that Emer may have some questions, and I'll do my best to answer them. But given the importance of a lot of what we're talking is attached to unique circumstances of your business, it might be the case that I need to provide detailed responses at some point after the webinar. But at this point, thank you again, and I'll pass back to Emer.
Thank you, John. That was very informative, and I hope everyone found it very useful. John and I had a discussion yesterday, and we thought that it would be difficult. He has lots of interesting videos and pieces and workbook that I will send on to you this evening. It was just becoming too cumbersome. So that's really important for us to remember, and we will do that for you. John, the idea of using global platforms, could we tease that out a little bit more? Because the penal servitude to one's website, I thought was really, really accurate. And on Monday, we had the pleasure of having Jesse James with us, and their show had to be postponed. Their show then they took the virtual forward, and he's developed a website called Shop On, which is basically the type of entity that you're talking about. It's excellent, it's sophisticated. I'm not advocating it, by the way, but it is of a good caliber. And we teased it out with him, and the hosting fees are $2,500. So whilst it might not suit all of our audience, I don't mean a specific platform, but such platforms, if you feel you're in the right company, could be incredibly effective. They really could, and simplify things so that creative designers and craftspeople can concentrate on what they're best at.
Absolutely, Emer, and perhaps I'll make a note, because perhaps I can refer to a number of platforms in the handout. And you're quite right, because the platforms, they cover such a broad range. And some of the platforms, the type of platforms that I tend to prefer are those platforms in which the fees are paid as a consequence of a successful sale. Okay. So there are no upfront costs involved. Their success is derived from your success. And I think that they would be the platforms that I would be encouraging clients to consider. The advantages, again, are that they deal with all the techie issues that are constantly developing, state-of-the-art AI, customer service support, plus fundamentally the issue of name recognition, which is so important. We all know it's so important when you're thinking about actually spending money online, having the confidence that the person that you're dealing with is reliable. And a lot of these platforms have all sorts of guarantees that are heavily promoted that effectively tells the customer, wherever they are in the world, that look, if you buy something through our platform and things don't work out, we will take care of you. And that's a massive plus as compared to trying to develop your own website to compete with these people. And we haven't even begun to talk about the enormous budgets that these people spend on marketing and promotions. But we all see it every day on our mobiles when we're being, I'm trying to avoid big names that we all know what I'm talking about. But what they're brilliant at doing is that if you've looked at something online, they're brilliant at sending you notifications and alerts and reminders about offers, etc., that are on the platform. And for an individual client to try to have that type of technology and pay for it on their website is completely unrealistic.
Yes, you're very, very subtle there. I mean, just one that would pop into my mind would be booking.com. Just there you go. So much so that, you know, I would book a lot in advance. Well, used to. Won't be going anywhere ever again. But and you get and you out of the side of your eye, you think, jeepers, have I forgotten one, or did I cancel that, or have I got the right date, or everything? But that's, reinforcement is something that you'd be getting, I suppose, automatically. If you were to pick the top 3 opportunities, what are they?
The top 3 opportunities in terms.
I presume this is out of Brexit.
Top 3 opportunities out of Brexit.
That person might qualify their question a little bit more. That if we can kind of, I think they're probably looking at if you can turn it. What does it allow us to look at, maybe, that we've been not complacent, but that we haven't been looking at.
Yes.
Up until 2016.
Exactly. I would say to that person, Emer, please follow that up with a little bit more detail, and I'll be glad to provide a more detailed answer. Apologies, I'm not sure what the.
No, here we go. It's an MBA question. Right. You mentioned that with challenges there are opportunities. Elaborate.
Yes, well, again, as part of the webinar, what I was suggesting is that if you go to the Intertrade Ireland website, and for example, if you use their tariff checker and you discover that your particular product or service that you're selling into the UK attracts a tariff which cannot be absorbed by you and creates difficulty in terms of it will result in a higher price into the UK marketplace. The opportunity, depending on your perspective, is that the same applies for UK companies who are trying to sell that product or service into the Irish marketplace. So therefore, don't just see the downside to it. The opportunity then is that they will have the same competitive issues with tariffs, which will increase their price of getting their product into the marketplace here. So that would tell me as a business that I should be then revisiting and contacting companies again who might be purchasing at the moment from UK suppliers, but they're probably going to be faced with higher prices in 2021. So that's what I mean about, there will be challenges, but there will also be opportunities.
This person's commending you on your perspective, that you're saying so optimistic, which is really, really good. And I don't know, I don't want to put you on the spot there, but amongst some makers that I would be speaking to is the consideration that they'll now skip over England, but I would think it's still worth keeping their foothold if they have outlets, that they just keep going. What would you think on that?
Absolutely, Emer. There is absolutely no basis to make that sort of decision, because for the vast majority of products, they will attract a tariff of 0.00%. Again, there's been a lot of almost fear-mongering over this. And I can appreciate that when we're watching the media and they're talking about industries, they're talking about car manufacturing, they're talking about financial services, which is obviously a huge one for the UK and the City of London. They're talking about plastics, they're talking about chemicals, they're talking about multinational industries that most of our clients are completely unaffected by. And even when we are talking about tariffs that will be applied to products, I looked up a tariff for a client who is in the jewelry. And I think the highest tariff at that point that I could find for them, it was on cufflinks. And it attracted a tariff of about 2.5%. Now, when we're talking about gold cufflinks, that's not even a bump in the road. So what I would say to people is, given the common language that we share with the UK market, under no circumstances should you basically be thinking that it doesn't feature as part of your plans. And I think when people do go to the tariff checker, they'll be very pleasantly surprised.
Good. That's really kind of optimistic. And I say that would be the way we'll go, that as you say, there's a common language, there's a lot of cultural similarities, etc. So I think that that's a very positive way to forward. And there has been a lot of jingoism. I mean, as you quoted, kind of on the brink or on the edge and that type of thing. And it was probably to sell newspapers or get media coverage, that type of thing. So I think we've answered all our questions for today that are immediately coming across. As John has rightly said, a lot of you may have individual business-specific questions, and you can just drop me an email and we will take it from there. Later on this evening, as I said, we'll be sending on John's materials, and it just leaves me now to thank you, John, very much for coming and discussing these two topics, which have become much more attractive than they were this morning. And to my colleague, Nicola, who's provided me with great support today. So thank you very much, everyone. And thank you, audience. It was great. Thank you. Bye-bye.